the town as usual. Katie, do your really energetic opening, please.
Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight for our presentation on our preferred option. We are very excited to have you here and to hear more about it and to hear your questions and comments and responses, because even though we now have our selection, it is still a work in progress. So we definitely want to keep and continue getting feedback from the community to make this the best school that we can possibly make it. So thank you for being here and thank you for being a part of this.
Absolutely, that's right, Katie. So it is a big deal that we're here tonight to share with you the preferred option. I know a lot of work from the team has gone into it, but I want to reiterate how much work has gone in from the community to get to where we are, and all the input that we have received from you all in the last, I guess, 10 months to put together this preferred option. So I'm going to turn it over to Paul, who's going to talk a little bit about the team and the schedule.
Thanks, Anne. Well, I think that any number of you folks that have been participating in these meetings have seen all of those folks that are on the slide here. Vivian and myself from Hill International, and the design team from LBA, Lee Sherwood, Ann Ketterer, and David Harris. And we're in the process of completing the feasibility study in the next month or so. If you can go to the next slide, this shows our schedule and where we've been. Today is depicted by the dotted line in the middle of this graph here from where we started back in January. We've had over 29 school building committee meetings, public meetings. We've had 28. Tonight would be 20. If it were an SBC meeting, it would be 29. 14 public forums thus far. So there's been plenty of opportunity to be able to see the design process and getting to this point where we are now. On November 6th, we'll be turning in the preferred schematic report that includes the selected scheme, and the MSBA Board of Directors is in mid-December, and at that meeting, the MSBA board will be voting to allow the project to continue through schematic design. In schematic design, we'll be working on improving the design with your help, all of you in the community. And the culmination of that will be to submit the schematic design, which will include a total project budget and a carefully estimated project that again gets voted by the MSBA Board of Directors, and then that generates a grant offer which goes in front of the voters in September. So that's where we are right now, and I'd like to turn it over back to Ann.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, so Paul, you mentioned 14 public forums. That's incredible. So again, a big thank you and a big shout out to the awesome participation that we've had in this process. But if you recall, way back when, in early January, so the very beginning of 2020, our very first public forum, we asked you about the goals, about what was important to you, the town of Swampscott, as it relates to this project. And then we took all that data and we made this pretty diagram, which basically outlined 4 what we're calling pillars or priorities that were really important to Swampscott. The first one is all about equity and education. And then the second one is site and traffic, followed by sustainability, and then community. Now, I want to point out that's not ranked. It's just that these are the 4 priorities that came out of 2 public workshops. So we just advance to the next slide. What we're going to do, thank you, David, is we're going to go through one at a time and outline the goals for each of the 4 pillars, starting with education. So your tagline is equity, inclusion, and excellence. And your goals are to align grades district-wide, to improve student placement, to create small learning neighborhoods, to reduce class sizes in primary grades, to improve scheduling and resource efficiency, and lastly, to support faculty collaboration. All of these things it's important to remember will be put in to your new school. And David, if you want to talk about some of the next priorities, starting
Sure.
with traffic, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yes, site and traffic, significant issue for the town. We've seen that, and we responded accordingly, engaging a traffic consultant who's been a terrific partner throughout this whole process. And we delved into traffic probably on an unprecedented level and scale in town. And we looked at multiple sites, as some of you will remember, really 5 sort of candidates that we looked at. And we looked at the traffic and the density and the walking characteristics, and got into queue lengths and all kinds of analyses in terms of traffic loads at certain times of day for drop off and pickup for all of these sites, to really understand what was driving the traffic and what would impact each solution, and what would really point to what is our best choice really in town for traffic. So again, those significant studies are available online if anybody wants to get back in those details. But just an example here, looking again at the density, the volumes, and of course safety, another critical factor, led us to sort of isolate the 3 sites within the what we call the golden triangle there. And of course we looked at all 3 even further to get to our preferred solution. And this is not over, far from it. There will be continued traffic analyses, recommendations, and coordination efforts that we make during schematic. And with regards to sustainability, another significant issue and area of interest and critical consideration for the town, and meeting with the town's sustainability folks and our own sustainability subcommittee as part of this particular project. We've developed the 4 sort of overall goals that you see here. It being energy efficiency, we're meeting a very extremely efficient, what we call an EUI, or energy usage intensity level, so that this building will be very energy efficient. Keeping in mind open space and site resources, very critical resources in Swampscott, because there frankly just isn't much of it, and we have to preserve what there is. So that was certainly a key consideration in our development of the preferred option. Interior environment and wellness. It's not just all about energy. It's also about the health of the students, the faculty, the public that are going to be using this building. So we're looking at obviously healthy, durable materials, which will of course have excellent daylighting and acoustics in here to really enhance the learning environment. And then operation maintenance, another critical long-term consideration for the town for its finances. We need a building that will not only consume a lot less energy than the current facilities do, but be easily maintained, durable, to really try to knock down those annual maintenance costs. And I'm going to turn it over to Lee. We're going to get into the sort of the history of how we looked at the options and where we have arrived.
Hello again, everybody. I recognize so many of the same names on the attendees list. So hi, everybody. It's good to see you again. Most of you have been following, most of you on this call have been following this through. So in a way, this is a recap of how we got here. And I will say that, you know, there was a lot of process and information gathering, but the real decision making really happened in the last month or month and a half. I also want to say that, you know, we kind of asked for an extra month with the MSBA so that we could listen, hear more from community members who were just kind of getting involved in the last month. And I think that was very helpful to everyone to hear people's truths and people's ideas and people's comments. I will also say that the option that we ended up with was not an option a month ago. It didn't even exist. And it grew out of the comments that we heard, especially around Stanley. And I just want to thank everyone for their input. we started off with many options, and then we came down to about 6 options, 2 in each of the categories of enrollments. The first, on the left is the first enrollment of just Hadley. And in the center, the idea of a district 3 through 5, one of them at Hadley and one of them at the middle school. And then on the right, we had the district K through 4, both at Stanley, because Stanley is the only place where that school can be built in your whole town. Click. We had a meeting fairly early on where a couple of the options were put off. And actually, this is a little bit incorrect, but the middle school option under this district 3 through 5, yeah, there we go, was also kind of discontinued. And that was really during when we were meeting with the finance committees and all of them, the selectmen, so that we could hear how other people felt about it. And then what happened was we really were posed, and this was after looking at all of the survey information and people's choices. We really had this comparison between a district 3 through 5 at Hadley and a district K through 5 at Stanley. That was really the first choice. Click. Next. And so this is a slide that, looking back, we're trying to remember and to demonstrate the kind of discussion that happened with the SBC and honestly with the other committees in town, because we attended a lot of those different committees. And what we're doing here is we're writing down some of the criteria that you would ask yourselves about these two different options. And the arrows point to the one, if it tipped the scale and one was proven to be a little more than the other. So on the left, you have the 3 through 5 at Hadley, and on the right, you have the K through 4 at Stanley. And this was not, my own evaluation. After the finance committee and the capital committee all met, they did a very robust kind of analysis of taxes and what it would take to build one of these schools now. And if you had to do the 3 through 5, later on, you'd have to build a K through 2 new in the town. And it was determined and voted on unanimously that the K through 4 would be the most fiscally responsible option for the town. I think that the number was something like $100 million less in cost over the next 20 years or so. And I think that kind of long range planning and that looking ahead, and I know that they talked over and over about the idea of not putting this on someone else in the future, but doing the responsible thing. So that was determined. For lower operating costs, obviously, if you can build one school new right now, you don't have the other schools to have to heat and cool and try to maintain. Operating costs also mean maintenance and repairs and all of that. And so that fell on the K through 4 side. And obviously the K through 4 is the only option immediately that addresses Clark and Stanley. Those would have to be down the road if you didn't do that one. This is very interesting because better for traffic and parking. I know that there's been a lot of talk about both sites being difficult for traffic and for parking. But when we talk to our engineer, our traffic engineer, and look at the sites, the truth of the matter is that the traffic at Hadley would have been all through the neighborhood, and there's no place to pull over and to queue the cars. So when we did the models, the traffic went into all the neighboring streets and created a lot of congestion. And there is no parking available on that site. It's so small So the parking would have had to be spread out as it is now, but even more so because it's a larger school of 540 students. Throughout the neighborhoods, we'd have to find more parking. With the Stanley site, we actually are able to get the majority of parking on the site, and through hard work with the traffic consultant, we're able to get the queuing for most days, except for like a really off crazy day, right on the site, so that the lines do not go into the major streets. And that also, people have been saying work in progress. We believe that that this whole project is a work in progress and that we need to keep working with you, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So clearly, District K through 4 at Stanley has a better queuing approach because the 3 through 5 at Hadley had no queuing approach. It was on a street. In terms of less impact on neighbors, both projects in your tight town would have impact on neighbors. At the Hadley School, there are people living right there and across the street and all around. They may be used to having a school right there and it's a little more urban, but certainly having more students there really impacts them. And we know that having a school with up to 900 students impacts the neighbors around the Stanley site. No one would ever deny that, and it's so true. So we feel like that's kind of, equal on either side. We were asked by the SBC at one point to look at the open space and the play space areas. And once again, the truth is that on the Hadley site, there is Linscott Park, which could be used by the students for certain activities. But on the actual site, there's only a small playground. Not even 10,000 square feet is available because of the size of the building. But on the Stanley site, which has maybe a third more students, you have multiple times more play space. Both fields, we actually can have a whole field, soccer field with baseball, diamond, and we can have multiple play areas the size of the one at Hadley. So once again, if you look at this kind of objectively, there's a lot more space there for the number of kids. We saw that district equity and accessibility was a really important issue. And we know that the educational leaders preferred the K through 4 because it brought all of the resources, the special education and teachers all together in one place so that students didn't have to have different levels of resources. Currently, and if we built a 3 through 5, the K through 2s between Clark and Stanley would have very different resources. And it's been stated over and over that with 3 elementary schools, each having very different schools and resources, that's not really equal in your town. And it's great to see people starting to think for one another and about one another. In terms of better educational spaces, we have the exact same program for each school in terms for 3 through 5 and for K through 4. They each have the program for the MSBA and they both lay out beautifully as buildings. That's a wash. Another factor that the SBC spoke about with the district K through 4 is that it would have fewer student transitions. You would have pre-K, but then you would have K through 4 in one place for all of those years. And then the students would transition once to the middle school and once to the high school. And we know how important student transitions for families and students are, especially in the younger years. With the 3 through 5, you'd have a pre-K, then you'd have a K through 2, then a 3 through 5, and then the middle school and then the high school. And just educationally, we know that is a factor. Both of these designs would have had small learning communities within, as you can, within the larger context. And the whole idea is to break it down. Both are good for sustainability. They're brand new buildings who will take complete use of the sun and the geothermal. In terms of better for community use, they're very different, but we would yes, they're pretty much equal. The downtown school with District 3 through 5, everybody loved the idea that it connects to Linscott Park and it could be used as a downtown community space. But then again, in the more suburban area, you have the gym and the cafeteria and the fields that all could be used for the K through 4. And then lastly, both have access to natural resources. In the case of the Hadley 3 through 5, it would have possibly been the ocean, which is a little ways away. But with the K through 4 at Stanley, there's a lot of natural Ewing Woods and a lot of natural resources. So if you look at the arrows, that's really why the decision was made between the two. We can talk about a lot of other reasons, but the truth is, it felt like, to me, as an objective architect, it felt like a pragmatic, logical, and financially prudent decision, which I understand. Next. Our next job, if you click on this for a second, I believe this will do it, was to look at the K through 4 after that was voted upon, because we actually had two options for the K through 4 on Stanley. And again, both of these options were in response to all the community comments and trying to deal with the scale, buffers from the neighbors, queuing, parking, all those kinds of things. And we worked really hard to try to come up with something that everyone could get behind. Next. So once again, we had a comparison. And this one was very interesting because I have to tell you personally that I thought that the option 1 was a fine school. It stepped on the left, it stepped away from the neighbors, which are at the top of the drawing, 1-story, 2-story, and kind of hid the 3-story wings in the back. Remember that on the K through 4 option, this is really 2 schools in one. It's you come in one entrance and you're on a lower school, and then there's an upper school. So already kind of breaking it down in scale and in number of students. But once we went through the kind of technical evaluation and talked through all the questions that the SBC had, it was very interesting how the option 2, which you see on the right, did a lot of wonderful things that the one on the option 1 did not do. For example, they asked which had a less imposing scale. And that's interesting because they both have, say, 2 or 3-story wings, areas to them. But when you drive in at Whitman on option 2, you're looking at a building across the field and you have some distance, which already makes it kind of fit smaller, and it's up against the very tall trees, which are taller than the building, and it kind of nestles against the back there. And it was felt that was much less imposing and a very different experience than coming right in on the building. The K through the option 2 on the right also had a smaller and more efficient footprint. It was 10,000 square feet less footprint just on the ground. All of that, and that's because it's all 3 stories and a little bit of 4 in the very back, which you don't see. It's a very efficient building, which also will probably make it easier to build. And because it's so efficient, that land that we've saved goes to the kids in the play space. It has better entry and views. So when you enter, you know where you're going, you see the entries. And it's further from the neighbors. If I look at option 2, most of the neighbors, are right along the top on the north side by Whitman. And there's one neighbor on Forest Ave Extension right there. And the truth is that it pulls totally away. And it also creates better buffers. Now, no matter what we do, we're going to create tree and screen buffers around the whole site. But when you look at option 2, there's the field there, right up against where the field is now, where the neighbors are. And in option 1, they actually had a street that we had to come around the building. And one neighbor actually talked to me and told me that they really preferred, obviously, the field there because it was much more natural and cars wouldn't be driving near their house. It clearly, option 2 clearly has more open and play space, including a good field. and play areas. And it has a much better field area. The other one's kind of an island. In terms of education, they have identical programs. They're arranged a little bit differently, but they both would have worked very well. They're probably both about the same sustainability. And in terms of community use, they're the same because they have the same, pretty much the same resources. It was also determined, though, that option 2 had a simpler vehicular flow. You come in on Whitman, you come along, and if you can see what I'm drawing, you kind of loop along, and it's all there's not a lot of wasted roadway or anything like that. On option 2, it had more queuing length, but then once you get to a certain place, you have to kind of move around the building to get around it, and we feel like that after the drop off, that whole area is kind of wasted and just pavement, and it really wasn't as efficient as we'd like. And then this was a very interesting concept right here. We were asked which of these would have possibly less rock or fill removal. As you know, there's rock and some ledge on the Stanley site. In both of the options, the most apparent ledge area, that's the highest, is in the corner on the southwest corner of the site up high. And the idea was that from whatever we could tell, that's the stuff we could scrape away for a few feet. The differentiator, and both of these buildings are the same there. The differentiator, though, is that in option 1, we're building in the other part of where the existing field is, while in option 2, we're not building on top of this area. So we don't have to worry about removing so much ledge, and we certainly don't have to worry about removing fill that was brought into that site and replacing it with structural fill to build a building. So that will save, clearly that one thing will save money and be much more efficient. And lastly, which has less our natural resource impact, we feel like both of them are situated such that they will not affect or damage any of the wetlands and woods around them, but we will be extraordinarily careful to both preserve and restore, if needed, any kinds of resources that are impacted. That's really our job here. Next. So after that whole process, we have a site. We have, once again, it was a unanimous decision by the SBC and others to select this particular option. It's a very simple option. And we really didn't have this option until we went on the site, talked to neighbors, and realized that if we could push this building back against this ends right over here, then we could really change the whole way it interacts with the site and really be the most beneficial to the neighbors with a building here. We're happy to see how simple it is, where all of the community spaces are in the middle. So at night or on the weekends, the public can come and use that, and the side wings could be closed off. We also see that we have a lower school side and an upper school side, each with their own play area and access. And that way we create a place for 200 to 300 students, 200 to 300, students. It's a very different kind of sizes. Every single floor plan level has a grade, so it breaks it all down that way. And as you remember, the idea is that you come in on Whitman, come around, and during the drop-off and pickup times, it is our recommendation that we try to leave through the UU Church parking lot. But it's quite possible that we can take this road and we can come back like this, have a little loop here, so that during all the rest of the time, the school could probably be serviced with many less cars at those times, just through Whitman. The Forest Ave extension is just for emergency vehicles and for, kids on bikes and walkers to come in and safely enter the school. And we feel like that's a good start. We'll work a lot on traffic patterns and parking and all of that. We also feel like the field is workable and gives you at least we'll have a 12-year-old 12-year soccer field, 12-year-old, I forget what it's all called. And we'll also have some kind of a little league area. And lastly, in this particular scheme, all of the classrooms are oriented properly to the sun for solar. Next. Second floor, you can see that we have, once again, we have these areas for the lower school and then for the upper school. And each have these smaller learning communities inside of them, which take 3 or 4 classrooms and gather them around common spaces with breakout rooms and light from above. Next. And on the very upper floor, that's where we place the gym towards the back so that its mass is hidden. And that's where we can have a 2-story terrace in the front overlooking and having a maker space. And once again, allowing all these students to have views of both the field and into the woods. So that is, in general and specifically, the design that was selected. Next. We have continued to think about how the building steps, how at the lower levels we can have kind of a 1-story piece. To when you're actually there, you feel like there's a little place that we can continue to work on creating outdoor spaces that feel more in scale for the little kids. And the entrance, or both entries, are very, very evident and should have a nice scale to them. Next. Now, I wanted to say a couple things because I know that we've been listening a lot and a lot of selection had been made and a lot of voting happened. But as David said earlier, this is a work in progress. Yes, we got to a certain place where we have a design that people selected who were charged with that responsibility. But our job moving forward from this day on is to work together. I have spoken to some of the community members even and around Stanley, and they're smart, they care, and they have a lot of good ideas. And I would like personally, or our team would like to work with you on as many of these issues as we can. We'd like to work to improve local traffic flow and parking. It seems like every time I talk to somebody in the area, we get better ideas and of how to handle things. We want to really talk about safe walking paths, sidewalks, biking, and the surrounding streets, so that we encourage kids to walk to school and it's safe. We want to continue this discussion of buses. We did a bus study where we found that if we took the middle school and the K-4 school, both of them, and had 5 buses in town, that we could decrease the number of cars to each school by 1/3. So say the K-4 has 600 cars, it would be 400 cars, and the middle school already has its traffic issues. If that could be enacted, and we should talk about it some more, it would alleviate a lot of concerns and a lot of actual car and congestion. Plus, I think a lot of people think it's an environmentally correct thing to do if possible. We want to continue to talk about the physical buffers of the adjacent neighbors. Again, I've talked to a couple of the neighbors right on the site, and it's very, very important that we stand in their yard and look out and understand what their views are, what they can hear, what the lights are like, and all that kind of stuff. And we can only hear that from them. And we want to have workshops. The best approach for the site exit with the UU Church, I'm quite sure that is at least one person from the UU Church on this listening. And I hope that everyone can work together and come up with some kind of a solution that benefits everyone. The site access is for emergency vehicles and deliveries should be looked at. Next. And here's another page where we want to hear from you about the design, the character, and the scale and the neighborhood feel of the school. And we'll do whatever we can within our power to make this the most appealing school, both visually and environmentally that we can. And we want to talk about interior community spaces and accessibility. I think that's something that can really bring the community together if we can get a good discussion about how can we make spaces that can be used by everyone at different times. We want to have workshops where we talk about the outdoor play areas, even with the landscape architect. I bet you some of you listening would love to be involved in the design of those play areas and the fields, and talk about lighting on the site and how that could be handled properly. And one resident who is adjacent talked to me about the hours of the school operations. For example, it sure would be nice if there was kind of a curfew for the elementary school at some point where there wasn't a lot of activity late at night and things like that for events. And I'm sure that that's the kind of discussion you can have. We want to talk, especially as we move forward, about construction protocols, and rock removal protocols. People are very concerned about blasting and vibration and damage. There are protocols for that, but also we want to build a school that avoids as much of that kind of work as possible because it's expensive and we don't want it to be a worry for you. And lastly, it's very important in the town, and I've been at a selectmen's kind of meeting where they talked about this. If you're going to have Hadley School emptied, most residents in town would really love the existing Hadley School to be maintained for community use in some way. I do not want to lose that to high-end condos, its location is very, very precious in your community. And I know that everybody kind of agrees on that and are a little bit burned from the past when losing schools that are important to you. And I know that that's something you all want to talk about. So I just wanted to say that these are the kind of things that we would do next in the next few months in schematic design. And what we would like to do is meet directly with you whenever possible, obviously with COVID, and have design sessions and workshops so we can hear your ideas. Next. I think that's it.
That's about it, Lee. Yeah.
Okay,
that's what we
so
have for tonight.
I know that I just went through a lot here, but we wanted to take you through it, and we wanted to give you this kind of idea of how we will work in the future to make this together, make this the very best we can make it with your help. Thank you.
Anne, do we want to open this up? How do we want to proceed?
Yeah, so I think now would be a great time to sort of hear from the public. So who among us is controlling the ability for the public to sort of chime in?
I can allow attendees to speak if they want to raise their hands.
Okay, so for all those participants out there that really want to comment on everything they just heard, I know it was a lot, please raise your hand and Suzanne will allow you to talk with us.
So while we're waiting for people to ask questions, if there's anyone on the school building committee too that wants to weigh in to discuss what we need to do to go forward, or any ideas you have for going forward here and helping Lee and the whole design team work together to achieve some of these goals that Lee just laid out in the last 2 slides?
Sure. I just wanted, it's Martha. I just wanted to point out that the K-4 really offers those small class sizes at the K1, where the 3 to 5 would not allow us to do that. Maintain the K-2, the Stanley and Clark, they're not big enough. In fact, they're going to be tight squeezes as is with the current class configuration and programming needs. So I just wanted to point that out. Why they do have both schools have great educational spaces. The 2 K-2 remainings on a 3 to 5 option would not.
Thank you. And that is so true. It's so nice to be able to draw all of those kindergarten rooms with their breakout spaces and support spaces and kind of integrated. And they're much larger spaces than you have now anyway, but then to have smaller class sizes because we're going from 7 to 9 sections in both kindergarten and first grade. It's a wonderful thing.
I mean, along those same thoughts, Martha, is like the open space between the 2 options too. We didn't really talk too much. I mean, sort of touched on that, but just, I mean, you know, we take for granted that we can use Linscott Park, and most days we can, but the principal at Hadley the other day spoke to how she only lets, you know, the 3rd and 4th graders, the oldest kids, out on that playground, and we'd have to just consider, I mean, out on Linscott Park, we just have to consider how many kids would be on Linscott Park and how there's no more blacktop area around the school to play on either. Like, in addition to open space, we just sort of lose all the blacktop area, the basketball courts and the 4 square courts that are around that school too. So everyone would be on Linscott Park.
Yeah, because it really goes from 120 kids to now 540 students who would be accessing that park, which is just a lot of foot traffic on that public access park. It's just a huge, huge difference from what we do now currently in terms of operations.
Right. Anyway, I mean, so Lee, is that, so do we have a plan? We're just gonna sort of maybe have some of these workshops and have.
Well, here's like what I'd like to, I mean, obviously we have to send this to the MSBA, and they're going to take a little bit of time to review and to accept, and they're going to ask us a lot of questions. So it's about a 1.5-month process, right, David? And at that point, when we get released to work on schematic design, which is our next, and we'll do that, you know, into the spring. It is our strong desire to get everyone involved, and I'm focused on the neighborhood because I feel like there's such a strong energy in the neighborhood, and there was, you know, not everybody agreed on all this stuff, and what I'm asking is, now that there's a selection, help us make it better. I think that everyone agrees that there needs to be a new elementary school in Swampscott, and this is kind of the chance to build that school, and this is the direction it's going in. And I ask you, at least from the design team's point of view, I ask you all for your help. We would never have gotten this far, even on this site with this design, without all the comments and all of the observations that we had. And there's a lot of people out there who really care about education in town. And actually, we're asking for you to help us. So what would happen is we would start to put together some workshops, and we can probably just have kind of like, we could do it by theme, or we could just get together, print out the site plan really big and talk about the site, or print out the building plan or the 3D plan of the building and talk about how the building could look and how that could all happen. And we could have these kinds of sessions. We can have sessions with our traffic engineer who comes in and really talks and has a map of the entire area. And we can talk about all the different connections and all the walking and all the roads and where your concerns are about things happening and not happening. do all these things. And I know, it's kind of funny. I noticed that in this world, people sometimes have more energy for when they disagree with something than when they agree with it. But what I'm proposing is that we use our energy for good, and that you guys all help us to make this really, really great together. And that's maybe I'm naive. I'm a little bit like that, but I've learned to be a fairly positive person in my life, and I really value your ideas. So this is what we'll be doing probably in January, February, and March. And if there's some kind of thing that you're most interested in, if you're interested in traffic and roads and walking, write to Suzanne and say, I'm really interested. I want to be involved in that. If you're interested in community spaces and the inside of the building and what could be done to help seniors and all that kind of stuff, do send an email for that. If you're interested in the construction side of things and making sure that that all the protocols are followed and all of that, or if you're interested in playgrounds and the kids and the play equipment, please get involved. That's what I'm really saying here tonight, because this is where you've done a bunch of information gathering, you've chosen something, and now it's time to move forward.
I think Lee too. So the process is we have schematic design, and then sometime by the beginning of the summer, we'll sort of have a really good idea of what this building is actually going to look like. We will have taken things out, put things in, done a whole bunch of stuff before the town votes on it in the fall.
And you know what? They should be voting on the building that they want. In other words,
I totally agree.
By the end of schematic design, if we do this properly, it will have been a collaborative effort where people told us, what would be best for the neighborhood here in this school and what would work best here. So when it gets to the place where in the summer and in the fall you're getting up to a vote, people feel a sense of ownership and pride in this, that they had a part in this. And I've met so many people who could really help with this, and I just want you to spread the word that we're looking for collaborators, people who are interested in making this better.
Well, how about the people who are here tonight who came, you all probably came for a reason, there's something you wanted to hear or something you wanted explained or something. I mean, if there's something to talk about, or you need more information, or you want clarification on something, now's a good time to sort of start fleshing out that stuff.
I think I know a lot of people's names by now, and I'm not going to use them because it would be a little embarrassing and stuff. But I will say that I've talked to some very, very interesting and smart and caring people, thoughtful people.
Sure.
And I'd love your help.
Yeah, we need to know what the strengths and the weaknesses of this design are going forward, so that we can help, strengthen the strengths and strengthen the weaknesses. But I think
that may be it.
Yeah, Taryn, if you have something to say, love to hear it.
Hi, how are you guys? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I was going to say, Taryn, are you listening?
I do have a few comments. I know that we've all discussed traffic, obviously, and I mean, that is one of our major concerns, I think, with this location, because I do think it's very difficult to consider, kindergarten to 8th grade within 0.2 miles of the town, and it's hard to hear the comparisons to Hadley 3 to 5, because I know that increase from what I looked at for the 2020 to 2021 numbers, the increase would only be 216 students versus, the Stanley site, which is about 600 plus more students. And so, I know that we all know the traffic is a major issue. So, but the thing that I do want to know more about, is I'm going to say, specifically to the Stanley neighborhood and beyond, I think people are really stressed about the whole blasting situation and even scraping. From some information we've heard in through all of this is looking into other scenarios with schools. For example, Marblehead, when they did the Glover School, we heard that there were 0 claims paid out to families when homes had damage. And, again, you can see why people surrounding this area are very stressed out, and we're already in a pandemic, and then we're looking at the possibility of having our foundations cracked and plumbing issues and all of that, and it's scary. So I would like to know more about that. And again, it's hard to envision the possibility of anybody getting reimbursed when we've heard many situations from other schools and nobody gets claims paid out. So and I remember talking to you, Lee, on the field at one point in time and asking the comparisons to Hadley. And I know that it was discussed that Hadley would not need blasting or drilling at all. So, I think that was one of the reasons that some of us that liked Hadley felt strongly about it, because there was less disturbance to neighbors in a sense. So, could you tell us a little bit more about that process and what your thoughts are with the ledge, because I know a lot of people's homes do sit on the same rock.
I think that's an extremely straightforward and constructive question. We have some information from a past environmental and testing test pit studies about the existing school and the rock and the ledge that's around there. And we actually tried to design this school around what information we did have. The next thing we're going to do, we're doing a quick environmental study just before this is submitted. But then in schematic design, David, I'll ask you to unmute yourself, but I'm sure we'll be doing borings and test pits and trying to locate depths and
Correct.
Areas. So the next step, since we have a site and a building site, is to map out the area, map out the site in a pragmatic way, so that we can get a really good sense of where the rock lies in all the different areas and what kind of ledge it is. Taryn, there is a big difference in my understanding between the scraping that fractured stuff, which is very different, scraping it away with and blasting. And our goal is to minimize blasting. And if we have a good map of the surface, a subsurface, we can start to work around that a bit. I know that Paul has talked about protocols, but Paul, can you talk about protocols, and can you talk a little bit about insurance and protections and things like that? Because if people, when I hear a story like that in Marblehead, as a person who owns a home, I don't like to hear stories like that. Can you tell us a little more about how this is or should be done?
Well, the first step that needs to take place, Lee, you are correct, is to map out the location of and characteristics of the site underground, as far as what the location of the boulders and the ledge are. And from that information, being able to understand what needs to be removed in order to put a building in its place of that. And from that, companies that specialize in this figure out, what needs to be removed, and do their and design a protocol for how much they remove at a time and so forth. Like smaller blasts to remove smaller amounts depending on what's going on around it, etc. So it's kind of really individually tailored to the scenario, the situation that you have. So, and being able to minimize that impact is obviously is the goal. So that's one item. What goes on to be able to get the to get rid of the rock to put a building in its place. The next piece of that is, okay, what if something does go wrong where the where there is a a blast that actually transmits a seismic or a shock to a foundation, causes it to crack or change its settlement so that it cracks. Prior to the anything taking place, we look at and do surveys of the homes in the area. By state law, you have to do that with 250 feet of any area. We would and we do recommend increasing that diameter 500, 750 feet. What depending on what the layout of the homes and everything else that's around the site, in order to be able to ascertain exactly what we were starting with as the first condition before anything happens, and be able to make any determination if there's anything that changed as a result of any blasting that took place. And then the other piece is claims, and the rock removal companies and so forth. They carry insurance like any other type of business does, and it'll be very important to be able to make sure that that's all in place so that if there is a claim that it gets paid. And I don't know what happened in Marblehead, but I'll definitely be talking to some folks that live up there to try to find out and see what exactly happened, and get back to the committee.
So what you're saying, Paul, and this is for Taryn and the neighbors, is that there will be protections in place, but through insurance as well. And there'll be I remember hearing the story about the high school and how they expanded the diameter of the blasting, and certainly the high school had a lot more blasting than this could possibly ever have. That's my understanding anyway. It was
maybe is Kevin on the call? Still on the call? He could maybe speak to the high school blasting and if there was any issues.
I do want to mention that from what I heard is that I don't know obviously Kevin would understand the terrain up there better, but I think there are homes that are closer to this site in terms of where the building would be compared. So obviously, I mean, that most likely would change the scenario to an extent. And I don't really know if you're scraping versus blasting. Obviously, I've heard blasting is worse, but I mean, do you have to, I know that Lee said they could scrape to a certain extent, and then is the blasting then to put some kind, do you have to blast a certain number of feet down at that point, or do you have to blast, certain, how does that work at that point, I guess?
Well, it depends on what height, Taryn, we put the building at, or the elevation of the building. It is fairly typical if you live in a place that has ledge, and real ledge, which is solid. You can pour your foundations right on it. It doesn't move. It hasn't moved for 15,000 years, probably, right? Since the last ice age or something, or even before. And so the idea is, what we need to do is get down far enough that we can just put our foundations on it, and also that we can, every once in a while, we'll have to trench or something to bring in utilities and things like that. And again, this is really all about, so that is how it works. So you don't have to dig way down deep. We're not putting in any basements or anything like that. We want to do, slab on grade here and find the right height for all of this. So in some ways, it's always easier to, if there's a certain depth, like 4 or 5 feet, that we can scrape away and then get to a certain height, then maybe we can design the building height or the level of the building, and even lift up another part of it to that point so that we don't have to go any further. It does happen all the time, but what I think is that it costs money, and it also is a worry and to the residents. And we all want to make sure, and I know the town does too, that you're protected in case of any damage that's done. And I think that's the main worry here. Most of you won't be around the day that they might do some of that blasting. You don't really, you hear it a little bit. They put these big like tire, like rubber mats on top, and it just kind of goes boom. It actually is very unexciting for the most part. But if it does travel through rock and get telegraphed somewhere else, that all has to be documented. And so I think that that's what people want to know, is what is that actual protections process.
And also, do you tend to let people know, when you're going to blast? Are we going to be?
Oh gosh, yeah. That is
Absolutely.
that's such a big deal. To
Yes.
send out, we're going to blast between here and here. Is this okay? I mean, it's part of the protocol is so specific, especially in Massachusetts, right, Paul?
Absolutely. Everybody, all the butters, everybody that's within that area are going to get letters saying approximately when this is going to take place, what week, and then when it gets near to what that week is, then we tell you what day, and the day before we tell you what time.
Okay.
Taryn, I have to say that it would be really good if you stayed involved through this whole thing and could help us communicate the worries and the comments and connect with people as an advocate, just for a better process and for for people to be answered and listened to. And I would really appreciate that myself, because just hearing you today and the way you're talking about it fills me with confidence that we can work, and communicate. And if you don't ask, what happens is it kind of spins out of control and people don't have the right information.
Anything else, Taryn?
No, that's it for right now.
All right.
Hopefully, if we have more questions, we'll continue to let you know. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Hey, Cecilia, you ready to talk?
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Hi, thanks. So just to build onto what Taryn was asking about the blasting, I know that there are typically pre-blast surveys done. And I was wondering if you know at this point how far out those surveys will be done, how many feet away from the site?
Well, 250 feet is the state required minimum. And our expectation is that we will be probably doubling, tripling, or more from that area, just because there's a lot of residences that fall within those radiuses.
So when you do this mapping that Lee was just talking about, will you be considering where the ledge is and which houses fall along that same bed of rock to include those as well? I did speak with someone from Marblehead who was impacted by the blasting at the Glover School, and he was very involved in the process and the follow-up after. He confirmed with me that nobody was compensated there, just as Taryn had mentioned. And even the people that were within that 250-foot radius from the blasting site, but the people who were along that bed of rock, that were on that same bed of rock that were impacted, they were just left to their own will in terms of fixing things. So will there be any special considerations taken for those homes that may be more impacted than others?
No.
I know you may not have an answer for that right now, but it's just something to consider.
Absolutely. And we'd like to learn more about the experience in Marblehead with that.
Yeah, I have a great
Those
contact I could
smooth and-
pass along to you.
It would be really good to hear, because this seems like this kind of terrible lessons learned somewhere.
Exactly.
I know that Paul, as an architect, I've watched this a number of times, and I know that Paul, you have run this a million times. I I've never seen that happen, and I don't even know how that does happen, where people are maybe the insurance has to take time for them to be compensated or something, and they don't know it yet, or bad communication. But it just seems like there's such a strenuous protocol to this whole activity. You go to people's houses and you take photos all through the house, not just the foundation, but of their tchotchkes on the wall, to see if they fall off the wall. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's really supposed to happen, and I'm really surprised that would be the whole story in that neighboring town.
Yeah, so this person that I met and spoke with, he actually got very involved in the community after the fact. He joined the planning board there. What he shared with me is that it really comes down to the contractor that is chosen, and that the contractor that was used in the Marblehead project for the Glover School didn't follow through on the concerns. They didn't have a third party come through and inspect homes. After the fact, they sent their own employees to determine whether or not claims should be paid. The contract, he shared with me that the contractors are the ones who determine how strong the blasts are. They're not necessarily from the blasting company. And it really comes down to choosing a very reputable contractor. I know with the MSBA process, part of that is choosing the lowest bid, if I'm correct.
Not necessarily. No.
But we pre-qualify the contractors before they're allowed to even put in a bid.
Right. So if somebody we pre-qualify so that they're allowed to use certain ones. But if there's somebody like that who's clearly, if this actually happened the way it was, and that's not reputable, that person can be left off that list.
So can you elaborate on that pre-qualification process and what's looked at?
Yes, any project that is in excess of $10 million in the state of Massachusetts are required to pre-qualify the general contractors, as well as all of the major subcontractors that are on a project. And the process includes advertising publicly for pre-qualifications, obtaining the qualifications from all these different contractors. And a committee is formed from the awarding authority, in this case, the town of Swampscott, that reviews the qualifications and makes a determination as to whether they are, quote, pre-qualified. And it's usually based on their experience and their size of the company in relationship to the cost of the work that they are doing. And there are other criteria and so forth that can be included in that, as well as just references and capacity and so forth. And at the conclusion of the pre-qualification, all of the major contractors that will be able to submit a bid on the project. And it has actually been a really good thing, because it really has kind of greatly reduced the number of disreputable contractors that are in the public construction arena. The quality of construction and the work that's being done on these projects has just improved tremendously as a result of this requirement.
I would add, and I imagine, Paul, that when we do our documents and then we ask and write specifications for the earthwork and for the blasting and things like that, that is very important that we put in, obviously, the protocols, but also make certain that the contractor is well aware of their obligations for insurance and testing and checking and all of those things. If we put it in the documents, Tasya, and they agree to do it, they own it. And so our specification, right, Paul, our specifications have to be robust that way.
Absolutely. And this is a really interesting case that I have to investigate more fully, but in certain trades and fields, and one of the most probably where this really comes into play is in electrical. Contractors and subcontractors that are qualified to put in security systems or audio visual systems and so forth. They need to be able to meet a criteria in order to be able to submit a bid that they're qualified to do that as a subcontractor to an electrical subcontractor. And where my mind is going on this with the blasting is to try to do a similar thing with the blasting on this contract. And I have to investigate exactly how to do that because I've not heard of it done before, but it's definitely not out of the realm of possibility. And I think that it is an appropriate place to try to bring, to try to identify the subcontractor that's doing this work in the bidding process rather than after the contract is let.
Thank you. Yeah, that 200-foot state requirement is really so minimal.
It is a minimal.
And I know that, I live just behind the Ewing Woods. If you stood on my front steps and shot a gun, you would hit the Stanley School right through the woods. So my neighbors and I are all on that same bed of rock, but we're just past the woods.
Right.
So we would, many of us would fall. I mean, all of us would fall outside that 250-foot radius. But I fear, based on what I've heard from others' experiences, that by blasting that same ledge that we're all on, that we share, we would feel it the most.
I did not feed them.
What was that, Paul?
I was talking to my better half. I'm sorry. I didn't know I was off. That I wasn't muted.
I thought you were in a big room, like you're in a school. So, Tasya,
Lee, I'd also
go ahead, Kevin.
I'd also point out that in the town of Swampscott, in order to do the blasting, they'll have to secure a permit from the Swampscott Fire Department.
Yeah.
And the Swampscott Fire Department will, listening to the contractor, won't be independently making a determination on what the vibration is. There'll be seismographs placed at various locations. Statutorily, there's a seismograph automatically placed at the closest structure from any blasting. And then as part of the permitting process, there are typically there's always more than one, but usually there's several seismographs placed in various directions to monitor the vibrations in each direction. So it won't be a subjective analysis done by the contractor as to how bad the vibration was. There'll be an actual reading of what the vibration and air blast from each of the seismographs.
So Kevin, the town will be involved in helping to make these determinations and to help make sure that things are done the right way.
Absolutely. Yeah, as part of the permitting process with the Swampscott Fire Department, there'll be a detail officer overseeing the blasts and monitoring the seismographs, and those will be reported daily back to the fire department.
I'm guessing that Swampscott knows a lot about ledge.
So if I could speak to that for a moment, we do have pretty regular blasting that takes place in Swampscott over at the quarry. And while I haven't been impacted by it personally, I know it's been an issue for many in town with damage from blasting from the quarry, and those homes are all further away. And I know that blasting does have requirements, and it's overseen by the town. It is still problematic. So it does create some concern. Especially, I've learned things like on a cloudy day, those blasts are, they're felt harder than they are on a clear day.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why?
Because the cloud covering somehow keeps the blast lower and closer to the earth.
Whoa.
Well, it can, yeah, we've seen that phenomenon because you can't compress a liquid. So the shock wave from the blasts at the quarry, they're typically blasting upwards of 20,000 pounds of explosives at a time. So the shock waves can be perceived as being more severe. I just point out that it's interesting that actually most of the blasting at the quarry, they haven't shot in Swampscott in over a year. Most of the blasting is in Salem at the moment. But I to your point, I do know that the quarry blasting is of concern, and it is monitored.
Well, I'd like to respectfully request that stay on everyone's radar, and that it be handled, very carefully. And,
These blasts would be very much less than the quarry. They wouldn't be using anywhere near the amount of explosives that the quarry is using. It's a different blasting altogether. But yes, it will be watched.
But yeah, that 250 feet though is really, it's not very far at all. And given the experience that people in Marblehead had, I think it's something that we can learn from and mitigate prior to having the same experience here.
Well, I just want to say you didn't have to even say it was respectfully, because I think you did it respectfully, and I think that you're going to stay involved, keep everybody honest, and keep bringing it up, and we'll keep bringing it up as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
I also just say that I know, because we're talking about this, you were discussing some of those repercussions, and I know I've read some information about how blasting can produce carbon monoxide issues into homes, and are there protections for that as well?
Carbon monoxide?
That's a new one on me, I must say.
I'm thinking about like how radon can be released or something, and I'm thinking about how if there was enough of a blast that gas could be, like a gas pipe or something could be moved. Or, I mean, that's probably one of the reasons for the fire department being involved, for vibrations and stuff. Carbon monoxide.
Yeah, it says that can send carbon monoxide in like kind of like pools through the ground, and then it goes into like piping systems, and it can be pushed into homes at times. So I mean, I know everyone's obviously going to have carbon monoxide detectors, but is that something that is a typical thing that can happen, or are there protections for that?
Does anybody have any experience with that?
That's a new. I've never heard of carbon monoxide being associated with blasting operations. Natural gas. As Lee was talking about, that utility lines and things of that nature, that's something that is monitored very, very closely, and would be, and I doubt that there'd be any utility lines where gas would be involved in the areas that would be blasted for this project. But I can certainly ask around, but I've not heard of carbon monoxide being an issue. But I mean, all of, any disruption to adjacent properties is noted during the process and, would be monitored. So whatever that would be.
Taryn, if you have a source for that, or if you remember where you heard that or saw, or somebody told you that, let us know so that we can follow through.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep.
So I don't see any more hands up, but I just wanted to ask a question if anyone's willing to answer it. I think many of you are paying attention because you care about this project, but did anyone just hear about this somewhere, or is anyone hearing about our meetings or anything, or have any idea how we can best reach people to get more people involved in these type of forums, or just reaching town residents? It seems like I see all you on Facebook, or a lot of you have to get the school building committee emails. So just always asking. All right, I got nothing, Lee. Looks like you've answered the questions that people have for tonight.
Listen,
Wait, never mind. Doreen has a question.
Oh, good.
Doreen, hi.
Hello, maybe mute.
Doreen, you can unmute yourself and talk.
Great, thank you.
Oh, I hear you.
You hear me now? AT&T,
Yep.
Verizon calling. Okay, I think the best way to reach the folks in town, and there was a recent survey done by the library, is through the water bills.
Yeah, that's a good idea. But how freaking is that? Quarterly?
Quarterly.
Yeah.
But my understanding of the process going forward is that, you're going to continue the work, but it will be voted on by town meeting in 2021, correct?
Yep.
Correct.
Okay, so I think that it would be best to hit the town water bills to let people know this is going on. Even though it's late.
That's a good idea. We could,
yeah.
So Marzi, the town planner is usually involved with us getting stuff in those bills for information. That's a good idea. We could have an informational flyer.
Because, I know you're working your tail off, Suzanne, but with the pandemic and all, there's not a lot of folks that are going to I think the attendance at the Sunday market is down and stuff like that. I mean, you're trying, but I think that's the best bet.
That's a great idea.
Okay.
Appreciate that.
Take care.
Before you leave, Doreen, will you promise to stay involved and help me?
Oh, I've been lurking. I will be here. I'm lurking, Lee.
Lurking? No,
not just lurking. Come on.
I didn't say lurking.
No, you didn't. I did.
Can we continue? Can we continue?
Oh, of course.
Make things better.
Oh, good. I think I've sent you both emails, and yes.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your help.
Okay. Take care, folks.
Bye.
Thanks. So, yeah. That's it, huh? Lee, anything else?
No, I just, basically you guys made really, I know that not everybody had the same viewpoint, but you guys made really logical decisions, and you got as many people in the town involved. Like you got all these committees and everybody involved, and not just schools, but the financial and the capital and all the people, selectmen. And I think that the last month was crazy, but extremely helpful to all of us. And I want to thank everybody for their energy.
And you as well.
Yeah.
So we have a week off.
I think
right?
I think David needs to write a report.
Right, David and Vivian and whomever.
Yes, we do.
Report for the MSBA, and then after you guys submit it, we'll So after November 6th, we'll start our next public meeting, I think.
I just want to thank you guys for making those 2 slides that really show the comparison between the 3 to 5 and K to 4, and then how we got down to which K to 4. I think they really clarify what seems very complex and lengthy discussions that we all had, but for people who didn't attend those meetings or may not understand what happened or how did we arrive at those decisions, like I really think that can be really helpful for people to see. So
You're
I want to
welcome. It can only be kind of done after the fact too, you know, once you see the whole thing, and we even missed a couple, as you said, and you know, as you pointed out, and we'll add those in, and maybe you guys can use that in some of your communication.
Some of the outreach,
And I think it's really helpful for people to, you know, see what all the different things when you're part of the entire process, and when you're able to look at the entire district, you're able to see all the different factors that come into play. And that's really helpful.
All right, everyone. So this was great. And it's only 8:30. So that's awesome. So thanks, design team. Thanks, Anne, for stepping in tonight.
It's nice to see everybody. It's been way too long. This was really helpful, I think, from the standpoint of design, and you all that have had to actually cast the vote to make this decision tonight was just really helpful. And I want to reiterate what David said, which is that this is the beginning of design, not the end of it.
Right.
absolutely.
Oh, nice.
I love that. Oh, that's
Take that pen away from Lee.
I know.
I know I turned that.
Well, Halloween is coming up.
All right. So everyone,
Yes.
thank you. Thank you very much. And community forum adjourned.
Okay. Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good night.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great
Good
night.
night.
Everybody, thank you.
All right, Ethan, should I stop the live broadcast?
I'm just closing everything up on my end, so you don't have to do anything.